Hey, what's up, y'all? Let me throw this little filter on here real quick. What we want? What we want? Glow? Nah, son. Going with the black and white. I like the black and white. I don't know why. We gonna go with that right now. Anyway, what's up, y'all? Um, just got off work, ready to head home in a second. I just saw this article. I want to do a quick video on, because I promised you guys more videos for one, but for two, this is just something that I saw and I wanted to discuss because I feel like a lot of people that do speak on this topic tend to never get it right. So where are we gonna go? Let's go over here. So yeah, I feel like most people that speak on this topic don't really get it right. So um, I just read an article, and I've seen this numerous times about how um, black people tend to be arrested at a higher rate than whites for marijuana use, and not only that, they tend to be convicted at a higher rate. I'm not necessarily going to talk about conviction right now, as much as I'm going to talk about. Actually, I'll touch on conviction a little bit, but today's main thing is going to be about arrest. So one of the things I want to talk about that I very rarely ever see anybody else talk about. For one, they say that black and white people tend to use marijuana at the same rate. However, I think they said about like 20% of white people are arrested for marijuana use and like 50% of black people are, or something like that. So with that being said, I think a lot of this plays into basically factors into where people live and things like that for the most part. Um, it seems like for whatever reason in this country that more black families are going to be in more lower income areas, or in more, I guess, areas that are patrolled and whatnot by the police. And some white people, for whatever reason, their families tend to have more money from years ago. They have wealthier families. I'll let you guys figure out how that happened. But they tend to live in places that aren't necessarily low income and that may not be patrolled by police quite as often. More so, people with money, for the most part, this is more of a class issue than a race issue, in my opinion. People with money, for the most part, they might have a gated house, a gated community. Their vehicles may not have a tail light out. They may have everything nice and running on their cars, more so than the person that's struggling and can't afford to get that tail light taken care of, or maybe get that registration taken care of. They may have to let it lapse for a week or something like that. I say that people that are having a higher income, for the most part. And once again, I don't necessarily think it's so much race related as it is class. Now, I do think that our prior race relations in this country have created the classism divides for the most part, but that's a whole nother video. But I feel like, if you're in a 2018 Lexus that your mom paid for, and you're in an area that doesn't have high crime, that doesn't have a lot of police patrolling it, and you go pick your friend up and you're riding around smoking a blunt and you go to McDonald's and you come home, the chances of you getting pulled over are slim to none. Now, if you're in a low-income area that's constantly patrolled by police, that are looking for something to do, that are constantly, expecting a crime to break out, and they're, looking for this, and you're driving around in a car that may not be up to code and may not have, everything going on with it the best, I feel like, have a higher chance of getting pulled over for either, maybe your car not being up to code, for just the fact that you're encountering more police in your drive than maybe the alternate person that I'm discussing. So, with all that being said, I feel like you're just at a greater risk for the most part. And everybody knows it's just, a matter of numbers. The more you take a risk, the more you roll the dice on something, the greater chance you have of it happening. I can, it's essentially almost like Russian roulette. You can load a 5 or 6 shot revolver with one round, spin that cylinder and close it, and pull that trigger and hope that you don't get shot the first time, and hope that maybe you get 4 or 5 trigger pulls out of it before you actually do get that round. But my point is that if you continue to pull that trigger, if you continue to roll the dice, if you continue to put yourself out there, eventually you're going to get what you're looking for or what you're not looking for. So with that being said, I don't think necessarily so much of a race issue. Now, I do think that there are racist police officers, both racist against white people, racist against black people, racist against, Hispanic people, everybody for that matter, because they're humans. So there are going to be actual racist police officers. But I don't think that really plays too much into what's happening as far as the arrest as much. I really think it has to do with the classism. It has to do with social divides. It has to do with neighborhoods. It has to do with how these neighborhoods are being patrolled. And more so, it's a lot easier, if you're living in an apartment complex or, in Section 8 housing where everybody's stacked up on each other and you don't have your own yard, and you go outside on your porch to smoke a little joint and there's cops driving around the neighborhood all the time patrolling, you have a higher chance of getting caught than if you live on private property in a gated community with a gated house, and you have, acres of land, and you can go out back where your swimming pool is and smoke a joint with your friends. So, if you ask me, I will say that the more privileged people are the ones using drugs at a higher rate for the most part. It's just they're not getting caught. They're not getting arrested. They're not being convicted. It's not being talked about nearly as much. Now, to touch on convictions, the same thing goes into place. So we have the person in the poor and the low income area that doesn't have as much money, and they get arrested for the same thing that somebody in a higher income area that does have more money gets arrested. The person in the higher income area is likely going to be able to get a lawyer. They may be more knowledgeable and just more prepared to fight something like this. And more so, it may look a little better to the judge for somebody that, is living in a higher income area, whose maybe father or mother or family members are working within the government, or, in a corporation that is well known, that has good public standing. It's classism for the most part. So even when these people are getting arrested, if you got all this money and it's a little weed charge, you're going to beat that for the most part. But if you're a Joe Schmo who's working 2 jobs to make ends meet, and your car's barely running, and, you can't even get a lawyer, and you got a public defender, you're pretty much gonna get that charge. There's no way around it, unless a police officer does something wrong in the procedures as far as when he makes that arrest. But if they have physical evidence on you, they found some weed, and, you don't got a lawyer, you're pretty much going to have to eat that charge when you go to court. So it's just something I've been thinking about that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about. They're like, oh, well, we arrest, more black people are arrested, and they look at just that, and they think that it's all racism. And like I said, I do think that racism may play a part in it, but I do think that it's more classism. I think it's more or less an opportunity thing. Like, they speak of crimes of opportunity, like, don't leave your doors open. It's a crime of opportunity. It's easy. They can just open your door and steal stuff out of your car. They don't have to break a window. They don't have to take quite as much of a risk. And, it's a lot easier to, ride around the neighborhood, see somebody walking down the street smoking a joint, or up on their porch in an apartment complex where they don't have their own yard, than it is to try to get a warrant or bother with somebody in a gated community in a gated house. Or, even more so, just somebody in a nicer, car. That I feel like police got to think about this too, right? As a police officer, it's your job. Now, I'm not justifying this, but I'm just being realistic. They're humans. So, they don't want to go to court. Usually on their day off, from what I understand, is when they go to court. They don't want to go to court and have to deal with, arresting somebody and doing all this paperwork and showing up and doing all this if they're not going to get the conviction. So why pull over that person in the gated community that's driving the Beamer truck, or the Lex truck, when you know that when it's all said and done, their lawyer that makes fucking $500K or $1 million a year is probably going to make you look like a dumbass, and you're going to end up losing the case anyway. So why not address the guy in the beat up Honda with the taillight out, that just got off work at 1 o'clock in the morning, that's working 2 jobs, that is struggling to make ends meet, and, that may have a kid or whatever, that doesn't have the opportunity to flee the country or anything like that. Not that most people would ever flee for like a simple weed charge, but I think you guys get the point that I'm making. So that was just something I wanted to speak on. I feel like it's not touched on very often in this discussion, in this conversation, when we're talking about arrests as far as marijuana and how it plays in a race. And I think that flows over. And just closing, I'm going to go ahead and get out y'all's hair, but I think that flows over into most other things in this country. I don't think racism is much as a problem anymore as classism. And I think that they've used classism to disguise racism in a sense. But I think, it's more or less the haves and the have-nots. And I think that plays a huge role. So with all that being said, a few tips from Mile High. Don't transport shit, especially if you're in a legal state. Don't ride around with shit in your car. Wait till you get home. It's not worth it. Don't be riding around in your car smoking, even if you're in a legal state. It's still not legal. Like I said, if you're going to get some shit and you got to run some errands, run your errands first. Grab your shit last. Even if you're in a legal state, I'm not telling you guys to do illegal stuff and to, use cannabis if it's not legal in your state. But what I am saying is, if you're going to make these decisions, be smart about it. Don't put yourself out there. Because for one, the police have a lot more things to worry about. They have a lot more serious crimes, people actually being hurt, and they don't need their time tied up with trivial shit like this. And some of them feel like they need to. They feel like it's the law. They feel like it's a public health issue. Not all of them are just evil like we may think. And, I'm not sitting here trying to make excuses for police. I don't really try to make excuses for anybody. I like to think we hold everybody accountable for what they should. But, I've said this before and I'll say it again. I'm not a huge fan of police, but I feel like most of them are in it for a good cause. and they're here to actually protect. So, you know, if they're making marijuana arrests, they may feel like they're actually doing what's right. So don't put yourself in a predicament to you know, for these things to happen. Take into consideration, you know, if your tail light's out, don't wait to get it replaced, because for one, if you go to court, you're gonna have to pay court costs. You get a weed charge, you're gonna lose your weed, you're gonna get all this other shit on top of it. So be smart, take care of your shit. Don't put yourself in positions. It's all about how you move. Don't put yourself in positions to get caught up if you can help it. And y'all be safe out there. Y'all got any questions, drop them below. I love y'all, and we'll be back with some more videos soon. Peace. We out.